As the river of darkness surged forward to devour Sunny, the small lantern of black stone hanging on his belt opened, and a tide of shadows rose from within to meet the swarm of beetles. He held nothing back, unleashing every wild shadow he had tamed, from mundane and shallow ones to those that were ancient, vast, and unfathomably deep. The night itself seemed to move as well. It moved to answer the call of the Master of Shadows. Two dark tides met with a deafening thunder, and thousands of beetles were instantly broken, crushed, and ground to black dust. Some shadows were vanquished too, and yet even more persisted. Permeated by Sunny's essence, they were as deadly and resilient as an ascended weapon would be. With no sun and no moon to illuminate the skies, there was nothing but dim starlight and a few distant flames to chase away the darkness. The whole world was shrouded in shadows, and so Sunny had an almost infinite well of them to call upon. The only limitation was his essence. However, the number of beetles was even more limitless. Despite thousands of them being destroyed in the initial confrontation, it was no more than a drop in the ocean. Already, even more were surging forward, crashing into the wall of shadows and tunneling into it with their sharp mandibles. Gritting his teeth, Sunny poured more essence out, strengthening the wall and turning it into a tall dam. Almost instantly, cracks appeared on its surface, and a moment later, the river of dark beetles overflowed, spilling over the top of the dam and spreading wide to encompass it from the sides. Funneled by the dying wish, all of them rushed toward a single point: Sunny himself.
Die!
He launched himself forward, moving with enough speed to leave after images behind. The Sin of Solace lashed out, slicing through 24 beetles with a single strike. Almost at the same time, a radiant orb of charged essence shot past Sunny and violently exploded in the surging mass of darkness. Samara had joined the fight, using her aspect ability directly instead of channeling it through the tungsten rounds of a rifle. Together, they managed to slow the beetles down a little. Sunny turned into a whirlwind of annihilating jade, delivering 6 swift strikes in an instant. However, even though cutting through the small creatures was not too hard, the effectiveness of these attacks was low. Almost instantly, he switched to using the flat of the jade blade to crush them. With his strength, each blow sent a concussive wave through the mass of dreadful pests, damaging and breaking their tough little bodies. His mind was split, one part commanding his body, the other controlling the manifested shadows to hold back the dark river. And yet, it was not enough.
Damnation!
No matter how fast Sunny moved and how many blows he delivered, the number of beetles was down as many small creatures as he could. Simply overwhelming. Already, many had flowed past him. Some tried to turn around to attack from behind. But the pressure of the thousands more pushing forward brought them away, forcing Belle, Dorn, and Kim to engage the creatures in melee. Out of the 3, Dorn was able to destroy the most with his aspect abilities and the heavy sledgehammer. Belle used himself as bait, phasing from place to place and using his sword to cut down as many small creatures as he could. Kim, with her rapier and buckler, was the least suited for this battle, but she did her best to lessen the pressure on the 2 formidable warriors. Behind them, Samara continued to charge small beads of alloy with essence and flicked them into the mass of beetles, each streaking through the air like a bullet and exploding into a wave of destructive force. Once her supply of alloy beads and needles was exhausted, she would have to use the crudest form of attack and simply toss out projectiles formed of unrestrained, wild essence. They were holding for now, but the tide of dark beetles was growing more and more overbearing with each moment. Their number endlessly swelled, and the dam of shadows was being continuously destroyed and rebuilt, consuming Sonny's essence like a gluttonous beast. Some distance away to his right, Bloodwave and his echoes had engaged another tentacle of the Heart of Darkness. To his left, Saint and Nightmare were holding back the third, and further still behind them, Jet and her cohort were fighting the fourth.
This isn't working. This is not enough.
Sonny knew that if nothing changed, he and his soldiers would be devoured by the appalling vermin. Already, many of the dark beetles had gotten past his defenses and bitten into his skin. Their sharp mandibles only left shallow scratches on them, which almost immediately healed. But still, the memory of these vile creatures crawling inside his ribcage made him shudder. It was only a matter of time before several bites would turn into a dozen, then 100, then 1,000. Would the marble shell be able to withstand countless thousands of mandibles plunging into it? Even if it did, it was only his skin that was so resilient. Once he was buried under a cold, slithering carpet of darkness, the beetles crawling into his mouth, into his nostrils, into his ears, into his eyes, would he be devoured from within? The Sin of Solus laughed.
Wouldn't that be a sight to behold? Ah, yes. Yes, I can't wait.
Uttering a silent curse, Sonny tried to pay the whispers of the Jade Sword no attention and concentrated on eviscerating as many of the beetles as he could.
I need to think of something,
he muttered to himself. He could always use Shadow Step to escape, but not quite. The last time, a few beetles were pulled along with him as he stepped through the shadows, most likely because the small creatures were not, in fact, alive. A bizarre idea suddenly appeared in his mind, but he quickly dismissed it. Even if it worked, he would only be buying himself a few seconds of respite at most. What Sonny needed was to enhance his offensive ability, to find a way to destroy many, many more beetles every moment. However, he was only human. There was only so much that his small body, no matter how strong, could do. No. His best hope was shadow manifestation. He was already using it to hold the river back and grind many beetles into dust. But that was not enough. Was there anything else he could do? Summoning a dozen shadow hands to crush and obliterate the beetles would work for a bit, but it would also burn his reserves of essence with terrible speed. Those hands would not be able to strike with as much strength as he could as well.
Damn it! If Serpent was here, I could have ordered it to assume the form of a massive monster and crush thousands of the damn vermin with each step.
Consumed by revulsion and fear at the thought of being eaten from the inside, driven to his limits, and desperate to find a way to defeat the River of Darkness. At that feverish moment, Sonny suddenly felt something click in his head. Scraps and pieces of previously accumulated experiences connected, forming a tentative hint of a revelation. The revelation was strange, unclear, and dubious.
That should not be possible, right?
However, he really could not see why not. Sonny sensed the endless ocean of formless shadows around him, all malleable and ready to answer his call. If Soul Serpent was not here to assume the shape of a dreadful monster, why not try to turn into one himself? The Formless ability allowed Soul Serpent to assume the shape of any shadow contained within its master's soul, as long as it was the shadow of a creature that was of the same or lower class and rank. Once transformed, the serpent would not only look like the creature, but also inherit its traits and abilities. Sunny, however, was not the serpent. While he trained his mind and body to possess some facets of the formlessness of shadows, he was still a human. Even if he used Shadow Step to turn incorporeal, he would not be able to make use of the same mystical ability. He could, however, command the shadows and manifest them into tangible forms. What did it mean? Slowly drowning in the tide of black beetles and feeling their sharp mandibles scrape against his skin, Sunny continued to fight and think. His thoughts were desperate and feverish, but at the same time, his mind was strangely calm. His first uses of shadow manifestation had been very simple. Nothing more than shapeless shadows turned tangible and pushed into motion. The only form they had was the one caused by the motion itself, and so they looked like dark tentacles. Later, Sunny trained for a long time to be able to effortlessly manipulate the shadows into more structured shapes. Chains, blades, walls, and a few more. With those, he had made several incredible achievements, building a bridge over a vast chasm, and stopping the advance of a mighty titan were not things a master was supposed to be capable of doing. However, his crowning achievement in the use of shadow manifestation was the Shadow Hands. Although not as powerful, durable, and numerous as the dark chains Sunny could create, they were vastly more complex and intricately structured. A hand had to have a rigid frame, flexible joints, dozens of degrees of freedom, and many more aspects that few people ever stopped to consider. Controlling one was also much more complicated. Currently, Sunny could skillfully implement two types of shadow hands. The cruder and larger ones acted as an independent fighting force during battles, while the much more agile ones, scaled to the size of his body, were used to give him an extra pair of hands for complicated tasks. So, if he could already create hands and arms, what was to stop him from shaping shadows into a full creature? Sunny growled as he was pushed back by the river of darkness, wide cracks appearing on the dam he had created. Behind him, Belle, Dorn, and Kim were barely holding on against the ever-increasing number of the vile beetles. Just at that moment, Dorn was a split second too low to bring his sledgehammer down, and one of the small creatures landed on his armor. The enchanted metal instantly split, but before the beetle could burrow under the giant man's skin, Kim's rapier flashed and pierced the beetle. The sharp blade wounded Dorn as well, but receiving a shallow cut was infinitely better than having a murderous little creature tear through his insides. Sunny gritted his teeth, striking down with the Sin of Solace. What was to stop him? The answer was very complex. Even shaping a functioning hand was already incomparably hard. He had spent a lot of time teaching himself how to shape shadows into hands on the fly. Creating an actual moving construct in the form of a creature would have been 100, if not 1,000 times harder. Plus, such a creature would not be very deadly since, in the end, it would just be a more complicated ascended weapon. There was something that could solve both of these problems in Sunny's possession: his knowledge of Shadow Dance. Shadow Dance allowed him to observe a person or a creature and learn the very essence of their style and physicality, then shadow it. How they moved, how they thought, how they felt, how soul essence flowed through their body. Of course, None of that would be possible if he did not first understand the structure of the body itself. If Sonny knew how a body was shaped and worked on an instinctual level, the task of forcing shadows into that form would become much, much easier. Additionally, he did not have to make that form act independently, to translate his power through it instead of relying solely on the strength of the shadows themselves. He could build it around himself like a shell. He could wrap it around his body like his own shadows wrapped around it.
It's like a suit of exoskeleton armor in the shape of a nightmare creature. A shell of shadows, with me powering it instead of the other way around,
he thought to himself. If he succeeded, he would be able to assume the shape of a nightmare creature, just like the Soul Serpent could. Of course, there would be a vast difference. Unlike his shadow, Sonny would not inherit the creature's attributes and abilities, but the physical form itself was already enough. He took a deep breath, almost swallowing one of the beetles. A savage expression appeared on Sonny's face, and he flinched back, narrowly avoiding the lunging pest. Would he be able to pull this off?
There's only one way to find out,
he muttered. To attempt something like that, though, Sonny needed two things. First, he had to choose a suitable form, and one that was exceedingly familiar to him. The better he knew the shape of the creature, the higher his chances of success would be, and even though he had shadowed many abominations over the years, there were very few that Sonny was confident in recreating. Secondly, he needed some time, with nothing to distract him from the task. Even if it was just a few seconds. Attempting something that crazy for the first time could not be done in the middle of a furious melee. Sonny could come up with some monster to try turning into, but several seconds of peace were much harder to come by. The bizarre idea that he had thought of some time ago suddenly popped back into his mind. He crushed 100 beetles with an obliterating strike of the flat of his jade sword, then continued to rain one attack after another on the inexhaustible river of vermin, summoning a new memory at the same time. Soon, a large alloy chest appeared in front of Sonny, large enough for him to comfortably lie on. It was the covetous coffer. Sonny commanded the memory to open its lid, then pushed it to the side and swiftly hid behind it. He also called back the deepest and most ancient shadows unleashed from the Shadow Lantern, hoping to shape them into a monstrous form. The coffer was a storage memory, and by now, its capacity was rather large. After months spent in Antarctica, that space was mostly empty. All kinds of things could be stored inside the alloy chest, with two restrictions. The things could not be too big, and they could not be alive. The black beetles, though, were not alive. Sonny did not know what they were, but since the creatures could travel with him through Shadow Step, which suffered from a similar limitation, there was a good reason to believe that the coffer would be able to swallow them as well. And it did. Positioned between the tide of black beetles and Sonny, who wore the dying wish, the alloy chest was like a bottomless abyss. A river of vile creatures flowed into it, hoping to tear through the bottom of the coffer and get to the human hiding behind it. However, all of them simply disappeared into the spatial storage space instead. A second passed, and then another, with countless thousands of beetles entering the dark chasm of the coffer's maw and never appearing again. After one more second, though, the storage space started to overflow. The lid of the chest instantly snapped shut, and then the memory dissipated into a whirlwind of white sparks. The river of beetles surged forward to devour the human. What rose from the veil of sparks, however, was not human at all. Instead, it was a fearsome creature that towered at almost 3 meters in height, with onyx black skin and a bestial, demonic face. Its mouth was full of sharp fangs, and 4 long horns crowned its head, protruding from dark, coarse hair. The creature had 4 hands that ended with sharp claws, and a long, twisting tail. Its eyes were entirely black, with no irises, and 2 vertical, furious pupils. A terrifying growl escaped from its mouth.
Success!
Of course, Sunny had chosen the shape of a creature he was most familiar with, the Shadowspawn Devil. Sunny had spent many long months in the body of the nameless Shadowspawn. From the bloody floor of the Red Colosseum to the burning streets of the Ivory City, he had fought countless battles with the awakened creature's 4 clawed hands. However, he had never experienced being the Shadow Devil as an ascended. Possessing the power of a master and augmented by shadows, he exploded with truly terrifying might. At 3 meters in height, Sunny had suddenly turned into a vicious herald of destruction. He lunged into the mass of dark beetles, eviscerating hundreds of them in a split second. He was holding a sword in each of his 4 hands. 2 of them were the Sin of Solace and the Midnight Shard, and 2 were shaped from shadows. Each moved with staggering speed, weaving a translucent sphere of devastation in the river of darkness. Fighting with 4 swords was, perhaps, not the best idea against most opponents. However, Sunny did not need a lot of control and agility to deal with the beetles. All he needed was speed, more attacks, no matter how crude. With 4 swords and longer reach, the rate at which he destroyed the vile creatures increased tremendously. He cut and crushed them with his 4 swords and stomped them with his clawed feet, even though his tail was swiping through the swarm, obliterating many beetles. For a few moments, the river of darkness seemed to slow its advance. Sunny used those moments to slaughter even more, alleviating the pressure on his cohort and allowing Samara to renew her bombardment of charged essence. The strangest thing about it was how comfortable he felt. Even while shaping the shadows into the form of the Shadow Devil, Sunny had no idea of how easy or hard it would be to control that shell. As it turned out, it felt almost indistinguishable from the real thing. All he needed to do was summon the memories of the second nightmare into his mind and bring them to life with the help of Shadow Dance. Like shadowing a memory of a creature instead of the creature itself. Of course, the demands were high. He needed to know the shape of the shadow shell in startling detail. Sunny suspected that he would not have been able to turn himself into many other creatures, if any at all. However, his knowledge of the Shadowspawn was nothing short of instinctual. Instead of controlling the construct consciously, he simply allowed himself to become it. The other demand was essence. Sustaining the shadow shell burned through it with dire speed. His reserves were not exhausted yet, but he knew he wouldn't be able to keep being the Shadowspawn for long. He had to do a lot of other things as well, like power his memories and manifest more and more shadows to repair the tall dam. The situation had improved, but they were still on a timer. If nothing changed soon, the result would be disastrous.
Don't think about it right now. Just kill. Kill as many as you can. The damned beetles have to have a break point too,
he muttered. Everything turned into pure chaos. Sunny felt as though his physical power was almost uncontrollable now. He pushed and pushed himself, expecting to hit a limit, but that limit never came. His speed, his strength, his force, all of it had vastly increased to the point where his thoughts were starting to fall behind his movements. Countless thousands of beetles were destroyed. Faced with the hurricane of swords, claws, horns, and fangs, the river actually recoiled, giving up several meters of frozen soil. Sunny thrust one of the shadow swords forward and let go of it at some point. Instead, arcs of electricity appeared on his palm and then formed into an arrow that seemed to be made of lightning. Sunny stabbed it into the mass of beetles, causing an incinerating chain reaction to destroy numerous creatures. He was hurt by the devastating current of electricity as well, but due to the elemental resistance of the marble shell and the augmentation of the shadows, the damage was superficial and almost tolerable. There was no time to think, only to fight. Somehow, miraculously, Sunny was holding the swarm of the black beetles back. The dying wish was pulling them toward him like a magnet. But instead of washing the towering shadow devil away like a dark tide, they were being constantly ground to dust, cut to pieces, and incinerated by lightning as soon as they entered within his reach. Those that flowed past Sunny were dealt with by the members of his cohort. Samara was causing one explosion after another to bloom amid the swarm, while Luster fed her a steady flow of essence. Both were nearing their limit, but they had not reached it yet. The same was true for Belle, Dorn, and Kim. Sunny couldn't see Saint and Nightmare, but from the glimpses of how little progress the second swarm had made, he knew that they were doing their part as well. The third swarm, that Bloodwave was supposed to deal with, seemed the most damaged. The three echoes were holding it back, but the fearsome Saint himself was nowhere to be seen. He was probably hidden somewhere within the river of darkness, fighting furiously. Since the echoes had not disappeared, he had to be alive at least. The only ones Sunny knew nothing about were Soul Reaper and her cohort, since they were too far away. Still, he believed that Master Jet would not go down easily.
Keep fighting! Keep fighting!
Sunny could feel his shadow shell slowly coming undone. After long minutes of rampaging within the dark river of vermin, it had sustained a lot of damage. He tried to repair the wound delivered to the towering shadow devil by summoning and manifesting more shadows, but many beetles were already crawling within. Their mandibles scraped against the silk of the graceless dusk or his skin from time to time. Fruitlessly, for now. His every muscle was burning from strain, and his mind was becoming clouded from fatigue. It took a lot to keep the shadow shell intact and moving. He had to let the dam crumble a couple of minutes ago already, because the pressure of it all was just too demanding. Nevertheless, Sunny kept fighting. In fact, the more tired and fatigued he became, the fiercer his rampage grew, and the louder the Sin of Solace laughed, whispering ugly truths into his ears.
You'll never give up. Leave your soldiers to die and save yourself. Come on. It's so easy to just turn into a shadow and slip away. No one will know. No one will tell. Everyone will just die. How irritating, he said.
Sunny tossed the strike of thunder into the surging mass of beetles once again, enduring the piercing pain of being electrocuted by its lightning, and felt one of his two shadow hands crumble down.
Not good.
He prepared to summon a new shadow to reshape it, but then something changed. A strange ripple went through the river of darkness, and it suddenly lost cohesion. The purposeful tide of black beetles grew discordant and shapeless, many of them simply growing still. Some continued to throw themselves at Sunny, while others scurried away. Nestled within the battered shadow shell, he blinked.
What just happened? Tired, So tired.
Sunny smashed through the nearest beetles and jumped back, sliding a few dozen meters across the ground as his claws left deep grooves in the frozen soil to slow him down. In front of him, the river of darkness was falling apart. The dark beetles, who had been acting like a single organism before, were now aimless and sluggish. Some grew lethargic or started burrowing into the ground, while others were wandering away. A few hundred were still pursuing him. With a thought, Sunny deactivated the dying wish and watched the small creatures dash away in fear. The swarm ceased its purposeful advance and instead flowed outward, losing the shape of a giant tentacle of darkness. It was as though a tank of water had been broken, water spilling to the sides. Utterly, chillingly exhausted, Sunny panted heavily inside the shadow shell. There were several beetles still crawling within it, stubbornly trying to bite through his skin. However, even their vicious bites had grown less determined.
The breaking point. Did they reach it?
His tired mind wanted nothing more than to release the manifested shadows and let the shadow devil form crumble into nothingness. But he forced himself to remain vigilant. Looking left and right, Sunny saw that the two neighboring swarms were in a similar condition. This was good news, but also bad now that the Heart of Darkness was acting directionless. Its deterrence seemed to have lost most of its power. The horde of nightmare creatures, which had been scared away by the dark beetles, was already starting to tentatively move closer to the group of humans.
Crap.
Sunny closed his eyes for a moment, then turned around and took a few steps toward the members of his cohort, who were similarly spent and battered. His soldiers, however, recoiled away from him. He looked down in confusion for a moment.
Oh!
With that, Sunny finally let the shadows comprising his shadow spawn return to their natural form and flow back into the intricately engraved lantern hanging on the black silken cord tied around his waist. The towering four-armed devil suddenly crumbled into a cloud of darkness, and a pale young man in a beautiful black tunic stepped out of it with a stagger.
Ugh.
Sunny fell to his knees, then raised his fist and angrily struck the ground several times, crushing the scurrying beetles.
Captain? Is that you?
He glanced at Kim, who was staring at him with wide eyes.
Yes, of course it's me. Who else would it be? And it's Major now, damn it.
He slowly stood up and summoned the Endless Spring, taking several large gulps of cold, refreshing water. Perhaps dismissing the shadow shell outside the city wall was not the wisest decision, but he felt that he would not be able to sustain it much longer. At least that way, he would have a tiny bit of essence left for whatever it was that would happen next. Sunny looked back, finally witnessing the full scope of the damage done to the defensive barrier. The southern span of the wall was deformed and broken, with many sections laying in giant piles of broken, melted alloy. Much more of them than when he had left it. Somewhere beside it, hidden by the sea of abominations, the awakened of the First Army was still holding the horde back. He wondered how many of them were still alive.
What is going on? Why did the Heart of Darkness suddenly stop beating? Where the hell are...
Shaken, he looked to his left, where Saint and Nightmare and Soul Reaper's cohort had fought. His shadows were already approaching, both littered with wounds. Neither had perished, but they did sustain a lot of damage. Even Saint, who was transcendent and thus much more durable than Sunny, had suffered dreadfully while battling the swarm of black beetles. Maybe because the small creatures were especially proficient at gnawing through stone. The mantle of darkness was slow to repair the damage as well, almost as if Saint's internal source of true darkness was as exhausted as Sunny's reservoir of essence. Her wounds were healing nevertheless, just not at all as fast as he would have wanted. There was one more figure making its way toward him as well. Sunny felt extremely relieved when he recognized Jet. Soul Reaper did not look good. Her armor seemed to have been destroyed at some point during the battle, and now she wore only the uniform bodysuit, its smart fabric wet and heavy with blood. Her face was ashen. In a few heartbeats, all three arrived. In the same period, the nightmare creatures started to draw closer, madness and hunger burning in their eyes. Sunny was the first one to speak.
Master Jet, what happened? Why did the bugs suddenly...
She staggered, forcing him to support her. Sunny and the members of his cohort looked at the leader of the irregulars with concern. Jet took a few raspy breaths, then said in a hoarse voice, "I'm all right. It was Bloodwave who fought his way to the center of the swarm and killed the thing in charge." Sunny blinked.
What? How? And what exactly did he kill?
She shook her head. "I don't know." It was only then that Sunny realized that Soul Reaper was alone. He hesitated for a moment, then asked,
"Your cohort?"
Jet gritted her teeth. "Dead." Then, she pushed herself off of him and straightened. "The Ascended that were supposed to reinforce us are also dead. They couldn't fight their way through the Horde. And speaking of the Horde, we need to get the hell out of here. Fast. We need to reach the secondary defense line soon. Otherwise, Army Command is probably going to blow us all up." Sunny froze for a moment.
The Rampart Protocol.
The First Army, of course, had all kinds of contingencies. There were a few set in place in case the city wall fell too. From relatively tame to drastic. The Rampart Protocol was the most drastic of them all. There were tunnels dug below the killing field, and under the span of abandoned streets between the city wall and the secondary defense line as well. All of them were chock full of powerful explosives, most of them created with the use of spell tech. And those explosives were set up to go up in flames together, turning everything outside the secondary barrier into a vast, scorching inferno. That measure was only supposed to be implemented after every soldier had safely retreated into the safety zone, and most of them already had. Army Command would probably wait for Sunny, Jet, and especially Bloodwave to return before pulling the trigger. But the situation was extremely chaotic, and communications were down. There was just no telling for sure.
Damnation.
Sunny glanced to his right and saw a battered Echo. The other two must have been destroyed, and a fearsome figure in sharkskin armor emerged from the mass of dark beetles and dashed towards them. Some distance behind the pair, a mass of abominations were already lunging forward. He looked back at Jet and grinned.
Then what the hell are we waiting for? Run!
Bloodwave reached them just a moment later. The mighty Saint looked spent. Sunny shivered when he noticed that his armor was torn, and there were ugly injuries covering his body. Out of the 3 Echoes, only the monstrous crab remained. The other 2 had either been destroyed or dismissed to save them from perishing.
Even the Transcendent Echo is gone. What could have destroyed one of those and severely injured a Saint? The Heart of Darkness. Just what kind of creature was it?
He felt a bit of dread and a bit of curiosity. However, now was not the time to ask questions. Their small party had to hurry and fight their way back through the boundless horde of nightmare creatures. 5 awakened, 2 masters, 1 saint, as well as 2 powerful shadows and an echo. They were an exceedingly formidable group. Granted, all of them were wounded, tired, and low on essence. Still, cutting through the horde while keeping everyone alive would not pose a problem. In theory. Bloodwave studied the rest for a moment, then sent his echo forward and growled, his voice husky, low, and domineering. "Move." Saint spared the mighty saint an indifferent glance, then mounted Nightmare and sent the dark destroyer into a gallop, the spearhead of the cruel sight igniting with the incandescent white glow in her hand. A shield made of pure darkness weighing on the other. They moved ahead of the party, cutting into the horde as a fierce vanguard. Soul Reaper was just behind, accompanied by the members of Sunny's cohort. Bloodwave and his echo flanked the awakened, protecting them from the frenzied nightmare creatures. Sunny himself took up the rear position, dragging his tired body along and preventing the abominations from attacking the backs of his soldiers. In a cacophony of chilling howls, they drove into the mass of abominations. Blood, severed flesh, and fragments of broken bone instantly filled the air.
Damn it! Damn it! Damn it!
No one in the group was weak, and some of them were truly powerful. However, the horde that Goliath had brought to the walls of Falcon Scott was simply too vast. Countless nightmare creatures were throwing themselves at the exhausted humans in a rabid frenzy, every moment, from every direction. Slowing down meant being buried under a mountain of monstrous bodies and torn apart. Their only chance was to cut through the mass of abominations faster than the abominations could pile upon them. Sunny continued to fight, with his teeth gritted. The rear guard position was the most awkward because he had to move backward at considerable speed while slaughtering the mass of nightmare creatures pursuing the party. By now, they were deep inside the horde, and the abominations were surrounding them. With how sharp and swift the Sin of Solus was, no creature could resist its blade. Sunny was managing somehow, for now, but his battered body was hurting all over. Even though the marble shell had yet to succumb to an attack, the few blows he failed to dodge or deflect still delivered some damage. It was only his skin that was as hard as stone after all, not his entire body. A sufficiently powerful strike would send a concussive shock through his insides, potentially causing internal organs to rupture. That hadn't happened yet, but being hit still hurt.
What the hell? It just never ends, does it?
Today, he had killed a titan and faced a creature that might have been even more wicked. Despite it all, the hard part was not over. The fact that everything around him could blow at any moment, plunging the whole place into an inferno of immolating flame, both mundane and magical, did not make Sunny feel any better either. Slowly, the ruined walls of the siege capital drew closer. Bloodwave's echo was almost destroyed, causing the Saint to dismiss it. Master Jet took its place with a resigned expression, her wounds starting to bleed again. The somber glaive was nowhere to be seen, but a slender naginata appeared in Soul Reaper's hands instead. Using it, she cleared the right flank of the formation with several vicious strikes. The pressure on Sunny was also increasing. By now, he was forced to support himself with shadow manifestation from time to time. His already pitiful reserve of essence was diminishing even further with each use. And yet, they continued to cut through the horde unimpeded, the ground sleek with blood under their feet. After what felt like 1,000 years of slaughter, the party finally reached the melted ruin of the city wall. In front of it, the awakened force in charge of the southern section was holding back the ocean of nightmare creatures. what was left of it at least. A grim expression settled on Sonny's face when he realized that of the initial 700, perhaps only 200 remained. Reuniting with the line of awakened soldiers gave them a moment of respite and gave the desperate soldiers a much-needed morale boost. Soul Reaper, Mongrel, and Devil, all three were famous champions of the First Army, and although few soldiers knew what Saint Bloodwave looked like, the Transcendent of the House of Night had a presence that made it impossible to mistake him for an ordinary person. Seeing them return alive from the sortie, the Awakened regained some of their spirit. No one was out of the woods yet, though. There was a large distance separating the wall from the secondary defense perimeter that had been established deep within the city. The whole abandoned area was set up to go in flames as well. Sonny looked through the numerous breaches in the deformed wall, noticing that the staging area on the other side of it had already been evacuated. The mundane soldiers had retreated, taking the logistics personnel, medical officers, technicians, engineers, and all other non-combatants with them. The vast resources stored inside the staging area were all left behind. Tall crates of MVP munitions, carcasses of slain nightmare creatures, loader robots, and so on. A wealth of supplies, much of it highly flammable or outright explosive, was going to be blown up once the Rampart Protocol was initiated too. Usually, Sonny would have been pained to see all these riches go to waste, but right now, he did not care. All he cared about was not being near when they did.
Right now, we just have to get to the secondary defense line. Once we're within the city instead of on a plane, evading the abominations should be much easier. So the last stretch of the way won't be as hard,
he thought to himself. Sonny glanced at his companions, evaluating their state. Everyone was exhausted, dirty, and covered in blood, both their own and that of nightmare creatures, but alive. The only problem now was to somehow extricate themselves and the 200 surviving Awakened from the attacking horde. At that moment, as if to answer his thoughts, Bloodwave turned to look at the mass of abominations. Then the enigmatic saint glanced at Master Jet.
Take your soldiers and go, Soul Reaper. I will hold the beasts back for a bit. And tell your commanders to activate the explosives as soon as you're past the defense line.
Sonny stared at him in shock, feeling that these words sounded a bit like a farewell.
You...
Bloodwave gave him a strange look.
I think you might have misunderstood, Sunless. I am not trying to sacrifice myself. It's just that an explosion like that won't harm a Transcendent too much. The Awakened, however, or even someone like you, better not risk it.
Sonny slowly nodded. Indeed, corrupted nightmare creatures could survive a nuclear explosion without too much trouble. Some fallen as well. Rampart Protocol was not going to kill a Transcendent like Bloodwave, or even seriously inconvenience him. Master Jet nodded.
We'll be going then.
The Saint nodded, then took a deep breath and started summoning several memories. Sonny did not know what exactly the memories were, but judging by the fact that Bloodwave had promised to hold back the whole horde all by himself, the abominations were in for a nasty surprise. Jet looked at him, then said quietly,
Once we start running, don't stop until you're safely behind the army fortifications. I'll stay back a little to make sure that everyone who is still alive gets safely out of the blast zone before Army Command begins the party. Expect to enjoy fireworks as soon as we see each other again.
Sonny forced out a pale smile.
It's going to be loud, isn't it? Damn, my poor ears.
With that, he spared her one last glance and turned to his cohort.
Come on, go!
Almost as soon as they dashed toward the nearest breach in the wall, Master Jet's voice boomed once again. spreading across the whole length of the battlefield.
Retreat!
The surviving awakened of the First Army did not make her ask twice. Delivering one last attack, they used their remaining strength to momentarily push the enemy back, then turned around and ran. To call it a retreat was a bit of a stretch. There was no order or strategy to it, just a desperate wish to survive. The defense line instantly collapsed, and the soldiers dove into the ruins of the city wall, their backs to the enemy. The only saving grace of the whole thing was Bloodwave, who somehow managed to fulfill his promise and stall the enormous horde of nightmare creatures all by himself, at least for a few moments. What happened outside the wall next, Sonny did not know. He thought that he heard the roar of a rushing tide of water, but at that point, there was no time to turn around. Sonny and his cohort flashed through the abandoned staging area and escaped into the empty streets beyond. Here, everything was shrouded in darkness. Many buildings had collapsed, creating a complicated labyrinth of snow and broken concrete. Others still stood, but were charred black by the flames. Some streets were strangely untouched and eerily empty. And of course, there were functioning roads that the First Army had maintained to deliver people and supplies to the wall. Sonny had led his people to one of these roads. Luckily, all of them could see in the dark thanks to Kim, so the lack of illumination was not a problem. Their running speed was not much lower than that of a moving PTV, but he felt a pang of regret for a moment.
I'm going to lose the Rhino.
His reliable APC was currently parked in a different section of the staging area, near where they had started their shift. Sadly, the battle had taken them far away from the main gate of the city, so there was no time to search for the mighty vehicle. Once this whole place blew up, the Rhino would undoubtedly be destroyed as well.
Damn it! Damn it!
Gritting his teeth, Sonny continued to run. He had to lead his people to safety, which took priority over everything else. Currently, they were slightly ahead of the rest of the retreating awakened. The span of the southern section was very long, so no one else was in view. Right now, all that mattered was speed. And each soldier was making their path to the secondary defense line. Sonny suspected that most would try to reach the maintained roads, but on this one, there was no one but the battered cohort of irregulars. Burned and collapsing buildings flew past them, one after another. They ran through the darkness, moving as fast as they could, their stamina long spent, and their lungs burning. The dark, empty streets, something about them filled Sonny with a feeling of eerie unease. It took him a couple of minutes to realize why the surroundings felt so strange. It was too quiet. After more than 2 weeks of the siege, Sonny had grown accustomed to always hearing the wall armaments roaring somewhere in the distance. But those armaments had grown silent now, destroyed by the fiery gaze of Goliath. At least across the whole southern section of the defensive barrier, not a single turret was firing. For some reason, the silence filled him with dread.
Almost there. Just a few more minutes.
Sonny spread his shadow sense outward, just to make sure that there were no dangers around. He even sent 2 of his shadows to scour the path ahead, to be safe, and ordered Saint and Nightmare to stay alert. But there was nothing there, just abandoned buildings and snow-covered ruins. Sonny did not see anything that could pose a threat to the cohort. His shadow did not see anything either. Neither did Nightmare and Saint. The only one to notice it was Luster, who just happened to turn his head in the direction the attack came from by pure luck. His eyes widened. It was a split second later that Sonny sensed a swift shadow flying toward the cohort. even though there was nothing there to cast it. But it was already too late for him to react. In the next moment, Luster suddenly lunged forward and pushed Kim aside, throwing her to the ground. Something flashed through the cold air, and it was instantly filled with hot blood. Something broke the dark surface of the shadows and flew into the cold air, moving fast enough to look like a black blur. Before anyone could react, Kim was falling down, and so was Luster, who had pushed her aside at the last moment. There was blood in the air, a startled expression on his face, and something was very wrong with the way he was falling. The black blur did not stop. A sharp blade instantly flashed toward Dorn, who had a startled expression on his face. The giant man only had enough time to slightly turn his torso. The blade missed his heart, slicing through armor and leaving a deep wound on his chest. The blade continued forward without pause, a split second away from piercing Bell's head. Instead, it simply passed through it. The swordsman could not possibly dodge, but he just barely managed to activate his aspect ability and phase through the strike, leaving Samara utterly open. Everything happened too fast. Before Kim even hit the ground, the enemy's blade was already mere centimeters away from slashing across her throat. However, a jade sword suddenly appeared in its way, blocking the lightning-fast attack.
What the?
Sonny, who had thrown himself in the path of the enemy, was tossed back by the ferocious force of the impact. The attacker, whoever it was so strong that his hand grew slightly numb. He collapsed on the scorched road and rolled, instantly jumping back to his feet. Kim landed on the ground. Luster did too. Both of his legs were cleanly severed at the knee, and blood was pouring out of terrible wounds. Sonny's eyes widened, but he had no time to think about it. The members of the cohort were too slow to defend themselves, and the ambush was not yet over. The creature, a dark silhouette moving with dire speed, had been thrown back as well. Sonny only had enough time to notice a humanoid shape clad in black armor, and instantly lunged forward. He had regained his balance a split second faster than the attacker, so the bastard had no way to avoid being pierced by the Sin of Solace. And yet, that was exactly what happened. Before the jade sword could strike the creature down, it simply dissipated into the shadows.
What?
Sonny was stupefied for a short moment.
It's Shadow Step.
He spun, but was a moment too late. The creature was already behind him, the black blade falling from above. Sonny gritted his teeth, then blocked the strike with his forearm. The marble shell turned as hard as stone and split open, broken by the vicious strength of the blow. The blade only managed to deliver a relatively minor wound, though. Most of its power was spent to shatter the shell. Before Sonny could counterattack, the enemy had blinked out of existence once again.
Not good.
The creature appeared some distance away, aiming to finish off Kim. At that point, however, Saint was already there. The taciturn knight had leapt from Nightmare's back and flashed across the road, deflecting the black blade with her shield. Inconceivably, the onyx shield cracked, and the shadow staggered back. The creature did not waste any time and lunged toward Kim, but then a black chain suddenly wrapped around its throat. A dozen meters away, Sonny grasped the shadow chain and jerked it back with all his strength. The enemy was thrown back, flying through the air and crashing on the road a few meters behind him. The creature slid back, then stopped, kneeling in the middle of the road. It remained motionless for a moment, and then slowly stood up, glancing at Sonny with cold, killing intent. Subjugated to the hate-filled gaze, Sonny turned grim. The creature was about 2 meters tall, with plates of jet black bone covering its body like a full suit of armor. Even its face was hidden behind black bone, which formed a menacing closed helmet. Two inhuman eyes burned with resentment and hatred through the cracks. The lower part of the helmet was split by a jagged line, and when it parted, a maw full of sharp fangs was revealed, opened in a mocking grin. Sonny, who was standing between the cohort and the abomination, grimaced and lowered his gaze a little. In one of his hands, the creature was holding a curved sword that seemed to have been crudely carved from a long black tusk, its edge sharp and harder than steel. Just as he had thought, the abomination was missing 2 fingers on the other. Sonny sighed, lingered for a moment, and then said tiredly,
"I had a feeling that you would show up."
The scary stories about a murderous shadow that people in Falcon Scott had been telling each other turned out to be more than just stories in the end. It seemed that the little scavenger had grown once again.
Curse it.
Of course, the wretched goblin would choose this exact moment to attack. Why wouldn't he? Sonny was tired, beaten, and very low on essence. The First Army was in full retreat, and none of his allies could intervene on his behalf. If Sonny was planning an ambush, that would have been exactly how he'd do it. Well, not quite. He would not have failed to kill most of his marks during the first assault. Not letting the scavenger out of his sight, Sonny briefly glanced at his soldiers. Luster seemed to be in shock, weakly trying to sit up. Kim was by his side, hastily applying a tourniquet. Belle, Samara, and Dorn were shielding them with their bodies, their faces grim and tense. The latter was bleeding from a deep wound on his chest. Saint and Nightmare were waiting for his command, ready to attack.
Bad. This is very bad.
Sonny had already taken a glance at the scavenger's soul, finding out that the damned waif had somehow managed to become a corrupted devil. The goblin, well, the bastard was more of an ogre now, and must have devoured a lot of nightmare creatures to become that strong. He must have devoured a lot of people as well, considering how disturbingly human-like the scavenger now looked. There must have been a lot of bodies left in the ruins of Erebus Field, and more victims still, here in Falcon Scott. Much worse, it seemed that swallowing a piece of Sonny's flesh allowed the creature to inherit some of his powers related to shadows. Dealing with an enemy like that would have been hard even if the cohort was in peak shape, but now it was going to be a problem. Not a big problem, of course. However, one thing made the situation truly dire. The whole section of the city around them, the road, the buildings, the ruins, was about to be destroyed by a titanic explosion. For a few moments, no one moved. Sonny was considering how to deal with the scavenger, while the scavenger was probably considering how to deal with Sonny, now that the ambush had partially failed. Or maybe the damn thing was simply enjoying seeing him squirm. Who could tell what was happening in that abominable head? 100 thoughts flew through Sonny's mind. No matter how he looked at it, the situation did not look good. He did not doubt that he and his 2 shadows were more than enough to kill the scavenger after all. Plenty of corrupted abominations had fallen by his hand. But would they be able to kill him fast enough? The wretched creature was strong and extremely slippery. Fighting someone who could teleport all over the place was a real nightmare. Belatedly, Sonny felt pity for all the poor bastards whom he had killed in the past. They must have all died full of frustration.
Serves them right.
Once Army Command set off the explosives below the city, Saint would probably be able to survive the conflagration, just like Bloodwave had said he would. Nightmare and Sonny had a chance to escape unscathed too, if they managed to find a shadow deep enough to protect them. His soldiers, however, would not. They were not saints, or even ascended. Neither did they possess aspects capable of saving them from the destruction. Not to mention that Luster was gravely injured and losing a lot of blood. As an awakened, he would not bleed out immediately, but getting him to a medic, or better yet an actual healer, was an urgent priority. The problem was that Sonny was not confident in his ability to protect the cohort if they chose to retreat. Once again, an enemy who could step through shadows was simply too mobile and unpredictable. Guarding a bunch of vulnerable targets from a corrupted devil who could appear at any moment from any side was a tall task.
Damn it! Damn it! Not only did the bastard get a chunk of my flesh, but he even became an utter menace because of it.
They could not remain and fight, and they could not retreat. Did the bastard know that everything around them was about to blow up? Or had he just been lucky to catch Sonny at the worst possible moment? If he had, that was some luck. The scavenger tilted his head a little, as though challenging Sonny to come and get him. The tip of his curved saber lowered slightly, ready to lash out. Sonny glared at him for a moment, then cursed silently, and threw an order over his shoulder. His tone calm and steady.
Kim, take Luster, climb onto my horse, and get the hell out of here. Get him help. The rest, retreat on foot. Saint will protect you.
Luster, who had been staring at his missing legs with a confused expression, looked up at the sound of his voice and asked shakily,
What about you, Captain?
Sonny grinned.
I'll keep our friend here company. Don't worry. I did not survive Goliath in the heart of darkness to die to this little wretch today. Go!
Kim was already dragging the young man toward Nightmare, her face pale and full of desperate determination. The scavenger spared them a glance, then stared back at Sonny. His mouth opened, and a hoarse, grating voice suddenly came out of it.
Die today, little wretch.
Then an ugly, gasping sound assaulted Sonny's ears. The bastard was laughing. Sonny frowned. He couldn't care less if the abomination wished to mock him, but his heart suddenly turned cold. Nightmare creatures capable of speech were extremely rare, and all of them were extremely terrifying. He could attest to that fact himself. Sonny had already been uneasy, but now his caution doubled. The scavenger was dangerous. The little wretch had been abnormal from the very start. He was gaining power too fast, growing too explosively. Of course, Antarctica was a perfect place for a creature like that to gorge on the corpses of powerful monsters. But still, Sonny's intuition was telling him that fighting the abomination alone would be a dire, dreadful mistake. But he had no better choice. He sighed with resignation.
I guess my luck is just complete utter crap today.
All that remained was Sonny, the scavenger, and the shadows. Goliath, the heart of darkness, fighting his way back through the boundless nightmare creatures. And now this. Sonny was hurt, tired, and miserable. So much so that he was getting a bit angry.
Fine. Let's do this, you rotten piece of trash.
There was a perfectly fine nightmare creature here to vent his anger. Sonny had already failed to kill the scavenger twice. Today, fate generously gave him a chance to finish the job, and he was not going to let it slip from his hands. The scavenger was strangely unreasonable in his hate-filled pursuit, following Sonny from LO-49 across the hellscape of the Antarctic Center. Well, Sonny could be an unreasonable person himself. He was very tired of being reasonable all the time.
Enough is enough.
A dark, slightly mad light ignited in his eyes. Behind him, Kim pushed Luster onto Nightmare's back, then jumped up herself. The black steed instantly shot forward, moving across the empty road with incredible speed. Belle, Dorn, and Samara followed, protected by Saint. All that remained was Sunny, the scavenger, and the shadows. And tons of explosives somewhere beneath their feet. The menacing black abomination moved, trying to dissipate into the shadows, but before it could, the shadows around it suddenly surged, shooting forward like sharp spikes. The spikes shattered against the creature's bone armor, but they did slow him down for a split second. And that was all that Sunny needed. Emerging from the darkness in front of the scavenger, he kicked him in the chest. With a deafening boom, the creature was sent flying back, but managed to land on his feet. The black tusk whistled, tearing through the air, and collided against the white jade of the Sin of Solace. Sunny felt his hand tremble from the force of the blow, and smiled.
Good. Don't you die too easily.
On the doomed streets of a snow-covered city, surrounded by ruins of collapsed buildings and remnants of devastating battles, a young man with alabaster skin and onyx hair was fighting a wraith made of darkness and hatred. One wore a simple tunic of beautiful black silk. The other was clad in menacing black armor. Both moved through the ruins like a pair of swift shadows.
Damn it! Break!
Sunny shuddered as he deflected a vicious strike of the mysterious black tusk, felt the impact send a painful jolt through his entire body, and guided the enemy's blade to the side. At the same time, he took a step forward and slammed his elbow into the scavenger's chest. The creature was pushed back, releasing the Sin of Solace from the bind. The cursed sword instantly flashed forward, slashing across the abomination's side. The defense, counterattack, and follow-up had been executed flawlessly, flowing into each other like the nimble steps of a graceful dance. Despite being light and swift, they also carried tremendous power and annihilating intent. And yet, the white jade slid fruitlessly off the black bone armor, barely leaving a scratch on it.
What the hell are you made of, bastard?
The scavenger was just too damn overbearing. At times, fighting him was like fighting water. When the Sin of Solace lashed out at the cracks in the bone armor, the scavenger would turn into a shadow, allowing the jade blade to harmlessly pass through. Other times, fighting him was like fighting against an indestructible mountain. The plates of the black bone seemed utterly impervious, and the creature's blows carried with them a crushing weight. Even compared to the corrupted creatures Sunny had faced, the scavenger was abnormally powerful. He was so strong that it did not even make sense that the Sin of Solace had come from the remnant of the Jade Queen, an astonishingly dreadful corrupted tyrant, and had an enchantment that bestowed it with unparalleled sharpness as well. What kind of indestructible creature had the vengeful goblin devoured to be able to resist its edge? It seemed as though there were peerless geniuses, even among the nightmare creatures, and the pathetic tiny imp Sunny had failed to kill many months ago just happened to be one of those.
Just my luck.
Gritting his teeth, Sunny braced himself and received another blow of the black tusk. Another bloodless wound appeared on his body. None of them were deep enough to be dangerous, but the damage was slowly mounting. Worst of all, he was completely suppressed. There were countless ways for Sunny to kill the hateful fiend. For example, if the sharpness of the Sin of Solace itself was not enough, he could augment the power of the Jade Blade manifold with his own shadow. He could manifest wild shadows as well, forming chains, swords, or tentacles to attack and entangle the scavenger. He could use Shadow Step to keep up with the damned ogre. But he was prevented from doing any of these things. Sunny could not afford to augment his sword because he needed the shadows to match the corrupted devil's speed and strength. And even then, the scavenger was faster and stronger. He could not use shadow manifestation because his reserves of essence were nearly empty. The same went for Shadow Step or any other trick he could come up with on the spot. The bastard had known just when to attack. He had only shown himself when Sonny was at his weakest. And now, Sonny was forced to defend himself against a nightmare creature of a superior rank, while being robbed of most of his powers. Even those that remained were countered because the scavenger possessed the same ones. Sonny could not blame the abomination for setting such a wicked trap, though, because it had been precisely how he had slain many powerful adversaries.
Doesn't matter. I'll still kill you. You're going to die no matter what.
Sonny's eyes burned with cold fury as he released the hilt of the Sin of Solace, switching to a one-hand grip. The Great Jian was the same length as a longsword would have been, but incredibly light and swift. Although it could not hack and slash with the same ferocious power as the scavenger's black blade, it was far more nimble and versatile. Sonny seamlessly switched to a more agile and reserved battle style, summoning the Cruel Sight into his free hand in the form of a short sword. The Silver Sword's Ghost Blade enchantment allowed it to strike down incorporeal targets, and so the scavenger was in for an unpleasant surprise the next time he chose to turn into a shadow. If there was one advantage Sonny had, it was his skill and expertise. The scavenger was tremendously powerful, cunning, and possessed a truly vicious, murderous will. He had devoured a great number of mighty creatures and grown with explosive speed. The bastard was supremely devious and surprisingly intelligent, enough to survive and even thrive in the hellish meat grinder of the Chain of Nightmares. But he was still an abomination, and a young one at that. His attacks were smart and powerful, but also clumsy and crude. Just like the makeshift saber he was using, which had been fashioned from some dreadful monstrosity's tusk. For now, the scavenger was able to suppress Sonny simply because of his timing and vastly superior physical might. But he was not nearly as experienced as a killer. As for spite and viciousness, both had them in spades.
Die!
As soon as the Cruel Sight manifested itself, Sonny blocked the black tusk with the jade sword and then struck with the silver one, aiming at the elbow of the abomination's right arm. No matter how tough an armor was, it had to be weaker at the joints to allow for enough flexibility. And indeed, there was a gap between two bone plates there. In truth, Sonny was not sure if the Cruel Sight could cut even the weaker parts of the scavenger. However, the creature did not know that. Just as expected, the vicious fiend chose not to risk it. The shadow powers he possessed were, strangely, both superior and inferior to Sonny's. As of yet, the abomination had only shown the ability to use a form of Shadow Step. That ability, however, was more insidious than the original, allowing the creature to not only teleport and turn incorporeal, but even selectively turn only parts of himself into shadow. And so, the body of the scavenger remained perfectly material, continuing to pressure Sonny with dreadful strength, while the middle of his right arm became ghostly and incorporeal. The Cruel Sight passed through the abomination's elbow without meeting any resistance, never even touching his flesh. However, the scavenger suddenly staggered and let out a pained hiss, causing a vicious grin to appear on Sonny's face. The silver blade might not have cut the creature's flesh, but it did cut his shadow, which was the same as cutting someone's soul. The damaged span of the fiend's arm instantly turned back to flesh and bone, but the damage was already done. Using the momentary lapse in the scavenger's awareness, Sonny lunged forward and tangled with him, pushing them both to the ground. Fighting a slippery shadow was a nightmare. He had far less essence to spare, giving the hateful fiend a vital advantage. Unlike Sonny, the scavenger could use Shadow Step as much as he wanted, avoiding attacks and launching his own from unexpected directions. The abomination could even escape if he wished. However, it would not be able to do anything if Sonny was clutching it with his own two hands. As the two hit the ground, he growled and grasped the scavenger's throat, constricting it with enough force to shatter armored alloy. Sonny's eyes were shining with dark, malicious joy. If he could not break the bastard's armor, he would just strangle him. Most nightmare creatures still had to breathe, after all. Even if the scavenger didn't, a broken neck was bound to solve something. It was strangely fitting. Sonny had killed his first abomination by strangling it with a chain, and now he was going to squeeze the life out of this corrupted devil too.
Die, die, die!
Sonny kept trying to strangle the scavenger in a strange reversal of their previous encounter. His face was contorted with a bestial snarl, and his eyes burned with indescribable bloodlust. The scavenger, however, was not easily killed. At first, he seemed to have panicked and tried to throw Sonny off himself, but after realizing that getting rid of the small human was all but impossible, the abomination calmed down, stared at him with seething hatred, and tried to stab him in the back with the black tusk. The tip of the crude saber bit into the silk of the graceless dusk and failed to pierce it. Sonny laughed with savage joy.
Try harder, bastard!
The scavenger obliged. Dropping the tusk, he grabbed Sonny by the collar and instead of trying to push him away, pulled him down. The two of them were suddenly face to face.
Crap!
The jagged line splitting the abomination's helmet opened, and countless sharp fangs instantly sank into Sonny's cheek.
Ah!
Realizing that he was moments from having his face bitten off, Sonny let go of the fiend's neck and delivered a vicious punch into its solar plexus. Then, he grabbed the creature's jaws, pushed them open by a few millimeters, and staggered back. The scavenger again let out a hoarse, hateful laugh, his teeth painted by Sonny's blood. Sonny landed awkwardly on his backside and grabbed his cheek. The right side of his face was all torn, but at least he did not lose an eye. Sadly, he already knew that the scavenger's teeth were poisoned.
You horrid wretch!
Grabbing the Sin of Solace, Sonny lunged forward to strike down the fiend before he stood up. However, the creature simply turned into a shadow instead, trying to flee, and then launching a surprise attack from a random direction.
Not so fast!
Without ever slowing down, Sonny dove into the shadows too. In the dark realm of shadows, the shapeless form that was the scavenger was swiftly flying away, and the shapeless form that was Sonny pursued. All of the abandoned area was shrouded in darkness, so they could travel as far as they wanted unimpeded. The scavenger was a shadow creature of the corrupted rank. Here, he was vast and dreadful, much more so than Sonny. And yet, Sonny had an absolute advantage. He had fought as a shadow before, a couple of times, and was all but helpless each time. But Sonny had been a mere child of shadows then. Now, he was their master. He had gained plenty of insight into shaping shadows thanks to shadow control, shadow manifestation, and especially his recent breakthrough, which he decided to name Shadow Shell. And since he was currently a shadow too, closing in on the fleeing scavenger, Sonny willed his shapeless body to change. Instantly, it came to possess 4 long, powerful arms. Then, sharp claws grew out of his fingers. Knowing that he didn't have a lot of essence left, and thus wouldn't be able to remain a shadow for long, Sonny did not waste any time and tore into the formless abomination. Instantly, it was as though a soundless wail of pain spread through the dark space. The scavenger seemed both surprised and aggrieved by the fact that Sonny was able to hurt him in this realm, which he must have considered safe before. Frightened, he tried to fight back, launching powerful but awkward attacks of his own. A familiar sickening pain of having his soul damaged permeated Sonny's senses. He had sustained some damage too, but not nearly as much as the damned goblin. Partially because the creature's blows were rudimentary and crude, and partially because his soul was protected by the marble shell. The scavenger realized that his struggles were not having any effect either. Escaping Sonny's cruel claws, he instantly escaped the shadows and emerged into the world above. They rolled through the ruins, exchanging a series of blows. Sonny received several more wounds, but the hateful fiend in his armor was still as impenetrable as ever.
Curse you! What do I have to do for you to finally die, damn it?
Infuriated, Sonny grabbed the towering ogre and smashed through the wall of a building, using the creature's body as a ram. Of course, that was not going to be of any use. A corrupted devil could crash through a mountain and still walk away without anything more than a couple of bruises. Behind the wall, there was a slope of charred rubble. They fell, ending up in a shallow pit. At some point, Sonny had lost his swords, and the creature had lost its black saber. The two of them stared at each other for a moment, both full of murderous rage. Then, however, the scavenger's gaze changed slightly. Sonny's face changed too. That was because he felt a slight tremor spreading through the ground beneath them. His eyes widened.
Hell.
The scavenger, despite all his sharp intelligence, was too naive. The explosion was not going to harm a corrupted devil. However, the creature did not know that. He had only gained full sentience. In front of him, the battered fiend suddenly recoiled, trying to escape into the shadows once again. This time, he was going to simply blink away instead of traveling through the dark realm. But Sonny had other plans.
Where do you think you're going?
Grabbing the abomination by the shin, he dragged him back and then pressed the bastard into the ground. A series of painful blows rained on Sonny's already cut and injured body, but he just held the ogre tighter.
What? Are you afraid to die? Let's die. Let's die together.
Sonny laughed, then used all but a few drops of his remaining essence to call upon the shadows. They surged forth, encasing the two of them in a sphere. Then, more shadows rose, creating a second layer around the black egg, and then the third. Sonny could have tried to escape the blast by turning incorporeal. However, there had to be a shadow for him to remain in that state. Once this whole area blew to smithereens, everything would be flooded with light. The shadows would be banished, and he would be thrown back into the material world. So he created this egg, trapping the two of them inside. Maybe it was even sturdy enough to resist.
Wretch, one way or another, you're going to die today.
He continued to hold the scavenger and pummel him with his free hand, feeling the skin on his knuckles splitting despite being reinforced by the marble shell. The bone armor of the abomination, nevertheless, refused to crack. The scavenger fought back desperately too. They were surrounded by darkness. The world outside, hidden by the walls of the black sphere. That was why Sonny did not see the Rampart Protocol coming into effect to obliterate a vast swath of the city, the remains of the wall, and the killing field beyond. However, he did feel it in the tunnels under the abandoned section of the city and the vast killing field beyond the devastated wall. Countless explosives simultaneously received a signal to detonate to prevent the interference of the nearby gates from influencing the execution of the Scorched Earth Protocol. All of them were connected into a labyrinthine network by simple but reliable wires. Even though the signal traveled through the wires with astronomical speed, there was still a slight delay between the detonation of those explosives that were nearest to the ramparts of the secondary defense line and those furthest away from them. From afar, it looked as though a ripple had spread through the ground. Moving outward, it rolled through the ruined streets of the city, with countless fountains of dust shooting up between the rubble. Some of the buildings that had withstood the furious fighting started to collapse. Some seemed to have burst apart. The vanguard of the horde of nightmare creatures had already entered the city, racing through these streets. They met the ripple first and were thrown to the ground. Then, the ripple reached the towering wall, destroying even more of its sections. The mass of alloy was only starting to fall, surrounded by the deafening groan of tearing metal. By the time the ripple moved past the mountainous corpse of the slain Titan in the field beyond and exhausted itself, now the whole horde had been encompassed by the destruction zone. All of it took no more than a couple of seconds. For a moment, everything was still, and then the ground started to fall. A vast swath of earth, many kilometers across, slowly started to cave in as if forming a giant crater. Now that it was completely untethered, none of the buildings survived. All of them toppled and fell apart, devoured by the gargantuan landslide. The remains of the city wall were utterly destroyed too. However, the true devastation was yet to come. As the inconceivable mass of soil sank down, it seemed to have reached a point of strange equilibrium, and then suddenly exploded upward in a furious conflagration. It was as though a giant bubble swelled from under it, and then burst open, unleashing a titanic pillar of flame into the cold winter sky. For a moment, the night turned as bright as day. Then, the roaring thunder of the explosion washed over the world, making the skies themselves shake. A billowing cloud of dust and debris rose high into the air, obscuring the ocean of flames, bursting from under the ground. A second terrifying blast resounded when the munition depot spread across the staging area below the wall and detonated under the assault of the heat and concussive force and pressure. The horde of nightmare creatures was consumed by the obliterating havoc. The weakest of them were instantly killed, while the stronger ones were severely wounded and burned. Only the strongest ones managed to survive the initial conflagration unscathed. In less than a minute, a gigantic area was utterly devastated, turning into an incandescent pit of fire, molten rock, and liquefied metal. The furious sight of it all, up until the world had become obscured by dust, was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. The soldiers standing on the ramparts had long fallen down and covered their ears, but even then, they could feel the terrible destruction through the violent tremors of the earth. Sonny, however, had first-row seats to the cataclysmic detonation. After all, he was stuck in the middle of it.
Die, 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 bastard!
Trapped inside the sphere of shadows, he held the scavenger down while pummeling him with his fist. Each of his blows would have been powerful enough to utterly wreck an armored APC like the Rhino, but the black bone armor of the Shadow Fiend simply refused to break. The longer it endured, the more furious he became.
Just die, damn it!
The sphere of darkness around them suddenly shuddered, briefly rising, then plummeting down. A violent tremor ran through its walls, and up suddenly became down. It seemed that the shadow egg was rolling and being thrown around. Sonny, who had been on top of the fiercely resisting scavenger, found himself falling for a brief second. He hit the roof of the sphere, and a moment later, the hateful ogre came crashing down as well. A massive fist connected with the side of Sonny's head, making him see stars.
Curse it!
However, the abomination could not press his advantage, because the shadow egg was flipped upside down, once again, a split second later, and then again, and again. The two of them were being tossed inside the sphere, ricocheting off its walls like rubber balls. Sonny almost instantly gave up on trying to comprehend where the ups and downs were, and simply concentrated on holding on to the scavenger. As soon as he let go, the creature would be able to slip away through Shadow Step. But as long as he did not let go, he could continue to try and kill the wretch.
Die!
Just as he was going to deliver another punch, a sharp pain pierced his shoulder. The dazed scavenger had finally given up on trying to free himself from the madman, and also on trying to meet him blow for blow. Instead, he instinctively retreated to what he knew best, tearing things apart with his teeth.
Ah! Let go of me, you rotten piece of trash!
Sonny had already had some poison coursing through his veins. Before he could do anything, however, the world suddenly shook, and a vicious shockwave traveled through the sphere. It felt as though all his organs had changed places. But the next shudder was indescribably more violent. Sonny thought that he had blacked out for a moment, but maybe he didn't. He growled and used both of his hands to grab the scavenger, afraid to lose his grip. With no free hand to continue hitting the creature, he then proceeded to headbutt the bastard with all his strength. Finally, Sonny felt something crack under his assault. However, it might have been his nose. It was hard to tell. The world was shaking, burning, and consisted of pain. Having gone completely berserk, Sonny paid no attention and continued to use everything at his disposal to break the damned scavenger. While the scavenger continued to bite and rip his flesh apart with sharp fangs. The creature's armor would not break, but neither would the human's body. His skin was harder than the hide of most abominations the fiend had devoured in the past, while his bones were 10 times tougher than that. What kind of ridiculous human was that? The air inside the sphere was permeated by unbearable heat, and it seemed as though its walls were starting to glow a dull red. Then a crack appeared on the black surface. Consumed by boundless bloodlust, the two continued to fight. At some point, Sonny had to admit that he was not going to break the scavenger's armor, but he still continued to deliver a barrage of vicious blows to the hateful creature. He refused to believe that the fiend was tough on the inside. No matter how hard the shell was, enough force was bound to turn everything protected by it into bloody mush. He suffered from the same weakness himself, after all. But no matter how much he struck the damned ogre, the scavenger did not seem too bothered by it.
God damn it!
Desperate and enraged, Sonny grabbed the creature's jaw with one hand and used the other to constrict the abomination's arm. Then, he opened his mouth and bit into the scavenger's flesh himself. Maybe Sonny was lucky, or maybe the bone armor in that spot had been weakened by his previous strikes. Regardless, he finally felt something give, and then tasted a despicably foul taste on his tongue. It was the scavenger's blood. Sonny had never tasted anything sweeter in his entire life. Feeling the creature shudder and frantically trying to push him away, he pressed his teeth deeper with wicked glee and then tore a chunk of flesh away. Sonny spat it out and grinned, then instantly regretted it when a massive fist flashed forward and hit him in the face with horrid strength. Ah! Sonny was thrown back, and at the same time, the black sphere finally broke. All 3 layers of protective shadows had been thoroughly damaged and now reached their limit. A net of cracks spread through the egg, and then it collapsed into numerous shards, exposing both Sonny and the scavenger to terrible heat and blinding light.
Crap!
The world shuddered one last time. The world. It was hot, but at least it finally stopped spinning. Sonny found himself staring into a glowing orange fog. The fog was pretty and smelled of fire.
I think I'm on fire.
He raised his head and noticed flames licking his legs. Luckily, his elemental resistance was high enough to resist them. The graceless dusk, too, was not affected by them at all. The black silk was pleasantly cool.
Right.
The orange fog was just dust illuminated by a sea of flames. Sonny was lying on the ground, surrounded by rubble and debris. Some of it was incandescent, and there were puddles of melted metal here and there. It looked like a scene from a fiery hell. He was hurting all over, and breathing was strangely hard. But he was alive. With a groan, Sonny slowly sat up, and then stood up with a stagger. He did not feel well. He was dreadfully exhausted, heavily wounded, and poisoned on top of that. As for the scavenger, Sonny looked around and gritted his teeth.
Don't tell me that the bastard escaped again!
He allowed his shadow sense to spread outward, then smiled, limping away He circled a pile of burning debris and stopped near the edge of a deep impression in the ground. The impression was about 3 meters deep and had almost vertical slopes. On the bottom, the scavenger was trapped under a giant piece of broken alloy. The creature seemed to be slightly dazed, but otherwise unscathed. The abomination was already trying to lift the alloy, which was groaning under the strain. He couldn't escape into the shadows because everything around them was brightly illuminated by the flames and the glowing fog. There was no shadow large enough for the fiend to dive into. For the moment, the creature was defenseless. The problem was that Sonny had no strength left to fight. Even when he had been able to, all his efforts failed to break through the scavenger's impregnable armor. All he managed to do was make the creature bleed a little by biting it, and he had only a few drops of essence left. Soon, the damned wretch was going to free himself and flee, or maybe even attack Sonny, who was barely able to stand, and finish him off. Sonny was in a real stalemate. He rubbed his face, stared at the struggling scavenger for a few long moments, and then used the last drops of his essence to summon a memory. The creature glanced at Sonny with hatred, then redoubled his efforts to get free. With the power of a corrupted devil, getting rid of a piece of alloy, no matter how heavy, should not have been a problem. But the scavenger was dazed and tired too. On top of that, he was severely weakened by having his soul ripped by Sonny's claws. It was going to take him a dozen or so seconds to escape at least. The fiend appeared to relax a little, though, when he noticed that the memory his enemy summoned was not a sword or a bow. Instead, it was a seemingly inconspicuous alloy chest. Sonny sighed, then smiled coldly.
"Here, bastard. Eat this."
With that, he opened the lid of the covetous coffer and kicked it, throwing the chest on its side. A flood of small black beetles poured into the deep pit from the bottomless black square of the coffer's maw. They landed on the scavenger, instantly biting into the bone armor. Where Sonny's weapons failed, the sharp mandibles of the dark vermin were similarly ineffective. However, there were countless thousands of them, and not all of the abomination's towering body was covered by armor. There were cracks, there were gaps, there were ways to get inside. The fiend frantically tried to escape, but it was already too late. His figure became covered by a crawling carpet of beetles, and then he was buried under their mass entirely. More and more vermin poured from the covetous coffer until the pit was filled almost to the brim. No trace of the scavenger remained under the seething mass of tiny creatures. Sonny took a step back and then drew in a deep breath. Then he let out a strange, shaky laugh.
"I did it."
Sonny's laugh turned louder.
"What is it with me and shadow creatures? Every time I fight one, I'm driven to the very edge of madness, and then a little bit past that."
He was laughing. The spell suddenly whispered into his ear,
"You have slain a corrupted devil."
He was so startled that he even missed the latter half.
"What?"
"Your shadow grows stronger."
Instantly, Sonny felt a flood of shadow fragments pour into his soul, tens or even hundreds of times more than what he was supposed to receive for killing a corrupted devil. As his eyes widened, the spell spoke once more.
"You have received an echo."
The battle was over. It was over for the irregulars, at least. The fresh soldiers pulled from the other sections of the wall were still fighting on the ramparts of the secondary defense line. But with the Heart of Darkness and Goliath destroyed, and the boundless horde of nightmare creatures decimated by the titanic explosion, the siege was reduced to the usual stream of chaotic, relatively small-scale skirmishes. The spine of the assault had been broken. Falcon Scott had faced the most dreadful battle yet, and endured. for the most part. The southern area of the city was entirely destroyed, replaced by a gargantuan crater. The buildings were gone, and a long span of the Great Wall was gone too. Even most of the killing field beyond was erased from existence, with only the towering stone corpse of the slain Titan remaining intact. It just lay on the slope of the crater like a mountain-sized pile of rubble, filling the hearts of the soldiers who saw it with dark glee. With the collapse of the wall, defending the city had become much harder. However, the crater formed a natural barrier of its own. Even though the secondary ramparts were not nearly as tall or formidable, they still gave the First Army a chance to resist the attacks of nightmare creatures. More than that, 4 out of the 5 direst threats to the siege capital were now eradicated. The Devouring Cloud, the Terror of Elo-49, the Heart of Darkness, and Goliath, despite the terrible price the First Army had to pay, were dead. Now, only the most powerful of the horrors remained, the corrupted Titan, Winter Beast. But it was being contained by Skytide of the Whitefeather clan, so for the first time since the start of the siege, the people of Falcon Scott felt hopeful. They were shaken and terrified too, but with countless millions of refugees already evacuated and so many powerful abominations slain, it was no longer impossible to imagine the end of this bloody affair. Falcon Scott only had to hold on for a handful more days. The ghostly flames of the aurora burned above the ravaged city, and the moon had hidden itself in the cold darkness of the night sky. Sonny was sitting in the familiar conference room of the government complex. Rather, he was sprawled on the chair, staring at the ceiling with a detached expression. His skin had healed, turning into a surreal painting of black bruises, but the internal damage remained. Even with his incredible healing speed, he still felt terribly hurt. That was because the scavenger had done a number on him, especially near the end of their murderous clash. Nevertheless, the hateful fiend was dead, and Sonny was not. He had even received an echo and a great number of shadow fragments. Unexpectedly, the spell had chosen to count the black beetles, who were not living beings, as a weapon of his. Therefore, after the appalling creatures had devoured the scavenger, it rewarded Sonny for the kill. He was currently looking at the ruins with dull eyes.
What to do? What to do?
2 strings of shimmering symbols were at the center of his attention.
Shadow fragments, 3,857 out of 4,000.
And
echoes, Ravenous Fiend.
The scavenger, Ravenous Fiend, had been a weird abomination. He had obviously assumed some qualities of a shadow creature, but not all of them. Otherwise, the bastard would have turned into a shadow instead of an echo. Or maybe the issue was that the scavenger's soul was corrupted, and thus unsuited to directly become a shadow in any case. As a result, Sonny had received almost 800 shadow fragments for killing the abomination, as well as a transcendent echo. The Ravenous Fiend had been a top-tier nightmare creature, a peerless genius of vile abominations, so turning him into a shadow was an easy decision. Having 2 transcendent shadows would be a tremendous boost to Sonny's power, too. However, there were 2 problems. The first one was the echo itself. When Sonny summoned it in the Soul Sea, he had expected to see a towering ogre clad in unbreakable bone armor. But what appeared instead was a pitiful tiny gremlin. The Ravenous Fiend was no fiend at all, it was an imp at best. The imp was still a transcendent devil, but weak beyond belief. His true power lay in a rather insane ability to grow stronger and acquire new traits by devouring various creatures or things. He also possessed a few very surprising and potent abilities. If Sonny carefully chose a rich diet for the little bastard, in time the imp could potentially grow stupidly powerful. even more powerful than he had been after devouring random trash across the Antarctic center. But that would only be in the future, and right now, transforming the Echo into a shadow would cost him no less than 300 shadow fragments. 300 fragments was not a large amount, except he was on the verge of becoming a tyrant now. Dismissing the runes, Sunny sighed.
Later. Now is not a good time.
It was indeed not a good time. In more than one sense. Suddenly reminded of something, Sunny somberly looked around. There were only 2 people in the conference room, himself and Master Jet. Winter's seat was empty. That was because Winter was dead. She had died while holding back the horde of nightmare creatures when the section of the wall under her cohort collapsed. A great number of people had died that day. Thousands of mundane soldiers had perished. And of the 700 awakened, only about 200 survived. Winter and her irregulars had been wiped out too. Even Soul Reaper's cohort had been destroyed, leaving her the sole survivor. Sunny stared at the empty seat, feeling a dull pain in his heart. Winter. The 2 of them had not known each other for long, but there was a bond between them. He liked the brash master a lot, and now she was gone, just like that. And he had not even gotten a chance to say goodbye. All of them were gone. Randall, Jesse, Davis, Dale, and now Winter too. He could still vividly remember their first meeting when the first irregular company was officially established. A few months later, there was just Sunny and Master Jet left. Of the 42 awakened irregulars, only 4 remained. Bell, Dorn, Samara, and Kim. Luster was alive too, but for him, the war was mostly over.
Damn it all.
Sunny studied the empty room, a strange dark burning emotion rising in his chest.
What is the damn point? What is the point of it all?
Soul Reaper and he were supposed to be having a strategy meeting right now, but there was nothing really for them to discuss. After some time spent in silence, Jet suddenly shook her head and stood up, accidentally sending her chair flying into the wall. She stared at it in confusion, then cursed. "We are just wasting time here. Go rest, Sunny. You deserve a break." Gods, we all do. With that, Jet picked up the chair, placed it near the conference table, and walked out without saying a word. Sunny was left alone in the empty room. He remained motionless for a while, then sighed and stood up.
Less than a week left now. We'll all be able to rest soon.
Sunny left the underground complex, breathed in the cold winter air, and limped toward the nearby army hospital. The walk was not too long, so he reached it within 10 minutes. Bell, Dorn, and Samara were in front of the building, and so was Abomination. The Echo was laying on the ground, shielding them from the wind with its massive body. The Hound had not participated in the recent battle because it would have been destroyed too quickly by the Black Beetles. It had been very helpful to the cohort in the past 2 weeks, though. It was strange in the past, Abomination had mostly ignored Quentin's Echo, Blackie, who used to follow the larger beast around. But now that Blackie was gone, the monstrous Hound always looked a bit forlorn. Sparing the Echo a sad glance, Sunny approached his soldiers.
"Major, you look awful."
Bell grinned, hiding hints of anguish that had taken root in his eyes. Sunny forced out a smile as well.
You should have seen the other guy. Nah, but you can't. I killed the other guy.
That produced a few chuckles. Sunny scoffed too.
Anyway, take me to Luster. He's awake, right?
They nodded. Dorn and Samara remained outside, while Bell guided him into the hospital.
He woke up an hour or so ago. I think he's in good spirits, considering. That might be the painkillers, though.
They walked through the white corridors, which were all crowded with hospital beds. An uncountable number of maimed and injured soldiers lay on them, some awake, some mercifully unconscious. The air was filled with the sickening smell of blood, burned flesh, misery, and despair. Doctors, nurses, and a few awakened healers were hurriedly tending to the wounded, the bags under their eyes blacker than the bruises covering Sonny's body. The sight of it was indescribably grim. Sonny kept his face cool, projecting the image of an intrepid ascended.
At least they'll survive,
he thought to himself. Modern medicine was very potent, and that was without even considering the awakened wielding healing aspect. If a soldier was delivered from the battlefield alive, there was very little chance of them dying. The only problem was the cost, but the First Army spared no expense, at least in that regard. As an awakened of somewhat exalted status, Luster was placed in a small room of his own. As they approached it, Sonny heard the young man's voice.
Kimmy, stop it. I lost my legs, you know? Not my hands. I'm perfectly capable of feeding myself.
When they entered, they saw a peculiar scene. Luster was laid on a bed, his stumps wrapped in a regenerative bandage, while Kim was trying to push a spoonful of synth paste porridge into his mouth. The young woman's usually timid face was determined and extremely focused. Kim froze, then turned and gave Sonny an unexpectedly fierce look.
Sir, that fool refuses to eat.
Noticing Sonny, Luster grinned.
Major, thank the gods. Please save me.
Sonny stared at them for a couple of moments and smiled.
Do you want me to feed you, Luster? Because you know I can.
The young man paled a little, then hurriedly grabbed the spoon and swallowed the porridge in one go.
No need to exert yourself, sir.
Sonny walked closer, summoned his chair, and sat down near the bed. Then he tried to say something, only to find out that no words came to his mind. Eventually, he awkwardly asked,
How are you doing?
Luster stared at him for a bit, then suddenly grinned and wiggled his stumps.
Don't worry about me, sir. I'm doing fine, really. I did tell you how my whole right arm was bitten off once, right? This is only a tiny bit worse. Hell, if I lose my left arm as well, one day I'll be able to brag about losing all my limbs to protect humanity. Girls can't resist a hero, you know.
Sonny blinked.
I guess he is all right.
Sonny sighed.
Well, don't worry too much. There are not a lot of great healers here in Falcon Scott, and all of them are busy. Once you go to Eastern Antarctica, and from there back to NQSC, though, the government will pull out all the stops. You'll be as good as new in no time.
Despite his intention to comfort the young man, Luster's smile suddenly dimmed. Looking away, he remained silent for a few seconds, then said quietly,
Yes, certainly, sir. Once I'm back in NQSC.
Sonny frowned a little.
Throw these stupid thoughts out of your head. You did more than enough. Very few people deserve to go home more than you do. Enjoy the cruise. And then make sure to get better and relax during an extended vacation. That's an order.
He paused, then added seriously,
Plus, the Rhino blew up. What the hell do I need you for now? Keeping you would probably just be a waste of perfectly fine provisions.
Hearing that, Luster laughed.
Nah, I see. When you put it that way.
He sighed.
It's not that I don't deserve an early dispensation, sir. It's just that...
The young man briefly glanced at Kim, then grew silent. He did not want to leave his comrades behind. Sonny could understand that, but there was no other way. Restoring 2 legs to a person was not impossible if sufficiently powerful healers were involved, but it took time, and a long period of recovery would still follow. By the time Luster was in good enough shape to fight again, the Antarctica campaign would be over. He shook his head.
The way I see it, your lucky charm finally worked. If it wasn't for you, Kim would be dead. Dorn too, probably. And maybe even Bell and Samara. You did well, Lester. You served through the hardest part of the whole campaign. Things will calm down after the Second Army arrives, so cheer up.
Lester looked at him, then slowly nodded.
That thing, you killed it, right, sir? What rank and class was it?
Sonny shrugged.
Yes, I killed it all right. It was a corrupted devil, and a very scary one at that.
The young man leaned tiredly on the backrest of the hospital bed and smiled.
A corrupted devil is good. That's good. There's no shame then. Ha! I survived an attack of a corrupted devil. Whoa. I'm pretty awesome, don't you think, Kim?
She scooped another spoonful of porridge, brought it to his mouth, and sighed.
Yeah, you are pretty awesome. Now eat the damn sludge before I get angry.
Sonny watched them silently for a couple more minutes, then found an excuse and left. He found Bell a few rooms over, where dozens of sleeping pods were installed in a large hall. The swordsman was standing near a particular one, staring somberly at its closed lid. Inside, Quentin's body slept peacefully. Not quite dead, but also not quite alive. The healer had neither died nor turned hollow yet. Considering the circumstances, that probably meant that he had fought his way to a seed and entered a nightmare. Conquering a second nightmare alone, his chances were exceedingly low, but not entirely non-existent. Sonny stopped near Bell and looked at the sleeping pod too. After a while, the swordsman suddenly said, his voice uncharacteristically sober,
Major, do you remember how I joked that Luster would be the first one to die?
Sonny spared him a surprised glance.
Sure, I do.
Bell remained silent for a long time, then awkwardly scratched the back of his head.
I was thinking, technically I can still win that bet, right?
With that, the swordsman glanced at him and grinned. Sonny scowled.
I guess, but who allowed you guys to bet without my permission? Unacceptable. I want in on the bet.
After leaving the hospital and sending his soldiers to the barracks, Sonny remained on the street, watching the snow dance in the stark beams of electric light. He had to rest, too. After a while, Sonny sighed awkwardly.
Right. I'm homeless now.
He had been staying in the Rhino, but now the APC was gone. That fact actually made Sonny feel very sad. The trusty vehicle had accompanied the irregulars to the edge of the Antarctic Center and back, surviving countless battles. He had grown attached to it, so losing the vehicle was a bit of a blow. It felt like the end of something. Shaking his head, Sonny started walking. He could get himself a room in the barracks, of course. The First Army had suffered severe losses, so there was plenty of space. But it was for exactly that reason that he didn't want to. Being surrounded by bereaved soldiers would do his already foul mood no good.
I can't stand the thought of having them look at me right now.
Respect, admiration, and hope. That was what he saw in the eyes of soldiers when they looked at him. They all had an expectation of him, and carrying those expectations was tiresome.
To hell with it.
Sonny simply wandered aimlessly for a while, trying not to think about anything in particular. In the end, he found himself standing in front of a familiar dormitory tower. He hesitated for a bit, then entered and ascended to one of the underground levels. The dormitory seemed much emptier than before. There had been 3 families living in the same apartment as Professor Obel and Beth, but now he could only sense 2 shadows inside. Sonny stared at the flimsy door for a few moments, then knocked on it. A few seconds later, it opened, revealing Professor Obel. The old man looked like he always did, having not changed even a little. Why would he? The previous day was a dreadfully eventful one for Sunny, but for the professor, it was just like all the others. The old man looked at him with concern.
Major Sunless, oh my! What happened?
Even though most of Sunny's body was hidden by the black silk of the graceless dusk, he still looked rather rough. Ugly bruises were covering his usually pristine skin, and his eyes were tired and dim. He forced out a smile.
Oh, that. Don't worry, I'm fine. It was just a very tough battle.
Everyone in Falcon Scott knew that the previous assault was a terrible one. After all, a large part of the defensive wall, as well as a vast stretch of the city itself, were now replaced by a giant crater. Even people hidden underground felt the titanic explosion. There were rumors, too. Army Command itself publicized the death of Goliath, hoping to improve morale among the refugees. Professor Obel nodded.
Yes, we heard all about it. Thank the gods you survived.
Sunny lingered for a moment, then said,
You mentioned setting aside some food for me the last time we met. To tell the truth, I'm kind of starving.
The old man laughed.
Sure, come in. Beth, Major Sunless is here.
The young woman emerged from one of the rooms and looked at him with a hint of relief. She froze for a moment, then turned away and cleared her throat.
Oh, it's you. Good. I'll heat the leftovers.
They settled in the kitchen, and soon Sunny was presented with several plates of simple but delicious food. Professor Obel had not been joking when he said that he would cook up a feast. The ingredients Beth had procured were indeed rare for the besieged city, and made for a splendid dish. It was better than what would have been available to Sunny in the barracks. Sunny ate and chatted idly with the two of them. As he did, some of the tension pressing down on his heart strangely dissipated, but most of it remained. At some point, Professor Obel suddenly smiled.
It slipped my mind. We were placed in the queue finally. Both Beth and I will be leaving the day after tomorrow. We've already received the tickets. I imagine you will follow soon too, Major.
Sunny smiled as well.
Finally, some good news.
He nodded and took a sip of the aromatic tea.
I imagine I will be one of the last ones to ship out. A couple of days after you. 3 weeks are coming to an end after all. Even though there were some delays, the armies mostly managed to stick to the schedule. Somehow. So, the next time we see each other, we'll probably be in East Antarctica. Unless they send you to the Northern Quadrant right away.
He glanced at Beth, hesitated for a moment, then said awkwardly,
By the way, my APC blew up, so I kind of have nowhere to stay. Is it all right if I crash here today?
Professor Obel chuckled.
Of course. Most of the people in the dormitory had already been evacuated. There are 3 empty bedrooms in our apartment alone. You can take anyone you want.
Beth hid a smile and nodded.
Sure, you can stay if you want.
Sunny smiled back and took another sip of tea. After that, he remained silent for a while, distracted. Noticing his strange mood, the old man asked,
Is something weighing on your mind, young man?
Sunny flinched a little, then shrugged.
No, nothing in particular. Just the usual stuff. I just feel useless, I guess.
He lingered for a few moments, then suddenly asked,
Have I ever told you why I came to Antarctica, Professor?
The old man and Beth glanced at each other, then shook their heads. A wistful expression appeared on Sunny's face.
It's stupid. Someone told me that I was lacking, so I thought that maybe I would be able to find whatever it is that I lack here in the Southern Quadrant.
He grew quiet, prompting the old man to ask with a hint of curiosity.
So, did you end up finding what you were looking for?
Sunny hesitated, then laughed.
I am honestly not sure. It's hard to find something that you don't know how to recognize. Maybe I found something. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I even lost something instead. I guess time will tell.
He finished his tea and looked at the two of them with a smile.
I did find some other precious things, though. I mean, this dish. It's a real treasure. You ought to teach me the recipe. I always dreamed of owning a shop, you know. But after meeting you, Professor, I'm starting to think that opening a restaurant might be a better idea.
After an eventful night, Sunny left the dormitory in a much improved mood. The air outside was frigid with bone-chilling cold, but it felt pleasant against his bruises. Sunny headed in the direction of the barracks, whistling a simple tune under his nose. As he walked, one of his shadows flew toward the distant ramparts to check if everything was all right there. Apart from the fact that soldiers were miserable because of the heinous cold, even more so than usual, the situation seemed to be under control. Disparate groups of nightmare creatures were throwing themselves against the ramparts, some larger than others, but it was nothing that the army could not handle.
Everything seems fine for now,
he thought. Sunny was still hurting all over, but at least he was capable of walking without a limp now. The barracks were a considerable distance away, but there was no rush. He enjoyed this rare moment of peace a great deal, studying the city as he traversed it. Falcon Scott was much emptier now. Miraculously, the First Army had managed to evacuate most of the 200 million refugees. Now, less than 2/10 of that number remained, not nearly enough to make the city feel crowded. Even though countless people fought and sacrificed to make it happen, Sunny couldn't help but feel that this emptiness was the direct result of his actions. It was nice to see his labor bear fruit. Among the ancient heroes Nephis sometimes liked to talk about, there was one named Heracles, who had accomplished 12 labors. Sunny wondered what that guy would think about defending this damned city. Well, from the descriptions, Heracles seemed like no more than an awakened with a moderately powerful physical aspect. Maybe a rather average ascended. He would probably think that Falcon Scott was a hellish nightmare and died in the first few days of the siege. As Sunny walked, a swift shadow fell from the sky, and a black crow suddenly landed on his shoulder. The crow stared at him for a moment, then cawed.
Ho! Sunny! Sunny! Ho!
Sunny spared him a somber glance.
What?
The echo waved its wings.
Come! Come!
Then it jumped off his shoulder and disappeared in the direction of the government complex. Sunny frowned, then quietly cursed and dove into the shadows. It seemed that his good mood was not meant to last. He glided forward with incredible speed, reaching the complex in no time at all. Emerging from the darkness near the guarded gates, he waited a few seconds for the security officers to confirm his identity. A useless formality, considering that pretty much everyone knew what he looked like by now, and entered the building. Quickly finding his way underground, Sunny hurried to the conference room where the irregulars usually gathered. As he was approaching, however, there was suddenly a loud bang, and the walls shook a little, dust falling from the ceiling.
What the?
Uneasy, he entered the room and saw Master Jet standing with her back to him. The wall in front of her was deformed, a net of cracks running through the armored alloy from the point where her fist had collided with it. Soul Reaper remained motionless for a moment, then turned to him. Her usually calm face was contorted by an expression of dark, boiling anger. As soon as Sunny saw it, his heart skipped a beat. He had never seen Master Jet lose control of herself in that way. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes for a moment, then said,
Sunny, good. you're here.
He glanced at the destroyed wall, then at her, feeling a chill run down his spine. Sonny steeled himself and asked,
What happened?
Jet let out a long sigh. When she spoke, her voice was cold and grim.
It's Tyrus. She finally lost a fight.
The two of them headed to the headquarters of the Whitefeather clan without wasting any time. While the elevator was taking them to the ground level of the government complex, Sonny tried to keep his voice even as he asked,
What do you mean, lost a fight? Is she alive?
Jet gritted her teeth.
I don't know. I've just been notified that something went wrong just half an hour ago. Roan sent me a message personally right before you came, but he didn't go into detail.
Sonny's face fell. If Jet's only source of information was Master Roan, that meant that Army Command had chosen to keep it a secret for now. And if Army Command was keeping secrets from someone like Soul Reaper, things couldn't be good. As they emerged from the underground complex and hurried to the Whitefeather compound, Sonny shivered again and noticed that it had gotten even colder outside. Before, he had not paid the cold any attention, but now the fall in temperature seemed foreboding.
Curse it, curse it, curse it all.
The guards of the compound seemed to have received instructions, and almost immediately after Sonny and Jet arrived, a familiar young woman appeared to guide them inside. He briefly felt glad to see that she had survived the battle with the devouring cloud, but then his thoughts turned grim and tumultuous once again. Sonny was shaken. He couldn't help but think about St. Tyrus, silently wishing for her to be alive. At the same time, he had to think about what her fall would mean for the evacuation. With no one to stop the winter beast, what would happen to the city? The two worries competed against each other, pressing down on his heart with terrible weight. Finally, they reached an isolated room in the depths of the compound. The young awakened spared the door an anguished look, then stepped aside, gesturing for them to come in. Inside, they saw an empty hall with some medical equipment and a lonely operating table standing in its center. The table and the floor around it were marred with blood. On it, St. Tyrus was laying, her eyes closed. Sonny let out a relieved sigh when he saw that her chest was slowly rising and falling. Sky Tide was still breathing, and she was still alive. However, she looked like a corpse. Her whole body was covered in blood and blemished by severe frostbite. Tyrus was unconscious, breathing shallowly. Her face was terribly pale, and her lips looked blue. And that was, without a doubt, only after the healers of the Whitefeather clan had tended to her. Sonny could not imagine how the fearsome saint had looked before. Roan was standing above her, not looking much better. He had been severely injured while luring the devouring cloud toward the city. Even now, the charismatic master was yet to recover from his wounds. One of his arms hung limply in a sling, and his usually lively face was dark and lifeless. When Sonny and Jet entered, Roan slowly looked away from his wife and gave them a dull glance. Soul Reaper gritted her teeth.
Roan, what the hell happened?
He stared at them for a few moments, then turned back to St. Tyrus.
Isn't it obvious? She lost. Actually, it's a miracle that she was able to hold back that monster for so long. It's also a miracle that she survived.
He remained silent for a while, then added evenly.
You are asking the wrong question, though.
Master Jet's icy blue eyes widened slightly. She hesitated, then asked coldly,
What the hell is going to happen then?
Roan lowered his head. Then he straightened his back and looked at them once more.
I think you know.
His eyes were bleak and tired.
The winter beast is coming, and there's no one to stop it. It's over. Maybe tomorrow or the day after that. Anyone who still remains in the city will die. I'm sorry, Soul Reaper. There's nothing else we can do.